So today we're in Roles of Men and Women, Part 2. The Roles of Men and Women, Part 2. Okay, so for a quick reset. All right, so last time in Part 1, because it was a couple of weeks ago, we dealt with Genesis 1, the creation of man. We dealt with woman coming from the man. We dealt with some of the issues that were in Ephesians chapter 2, the idea of breathing life into something without life. Okay, so we went through Ephesians chapter 2 in conjunction with, or the connection to Genesis 2, verses 7 and 8 and 15, okay? And so we then got to 1 Corinthians 12. Now, as we were kind of rushing through that, and also in Amos 3, we talked about two not walking together unless they're in agreement, right? They have to be agreed. So we're talking about these roles of men and women. Now, one of the things that I left out, so we're going to start here in Genesis chapter 2, in verse 15. I just want to emphasize or re-emphasize something that I missed the opportunity because, after all, it will be fun to smack you guys a little bit. So I missed that opportunity, so we're going to go back and do it. So in Genesis chapter 2 and in verse 15, we have the first mention of anything that gives us a hint of what Yahweh's intention or expectation was for men. For man, okay? This is his first statement of any sort that we understand. Well, he says earlier on in chapter 1, we're going to make man in our image. Okay, what do you want him to do? Okay, why did you make him? So in chapter 2 and in verse 15, it says, "And Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it." To work it and to guard. So that's our first mention, right? We have the law of first mention. You learn a lot from the first mention of something. So man was made, and now this is the first thing that Yahweh says that he wanted man to do. Okay? So Yahweh put man in the garden to work it and guard it. So what does the first part mean, to work it? Okay, so I think he expected man to be productive. Okay, he put him in the garden to be productive, to do something with the garden. Okay? Maintain what already exists, maybe add and enhance from there, being creative, whatever he was going to do. But he was there to be productive. He wasn't just put in the Garden of Eden to sit back and do nothing, okay? He was placed there to work it. He was also to guard it. And so, guarding what? You got to remember that this was an ideal place with Torah, Yahweh, the creation, and now man is in it. And so I believe he was given instruction. More than just eat of anything you want, but not that tree, okay? I think he was given Torah instruction. And so he was to guard this place, watch over, because guard is the idea of being a watchman, to watch over. So this is man's role. Okay, this is man's role before we get to woman being involved, right? Man is placed there to work. Okay, woman is created a few verses later. So for you men, your primary first role, expectation, is to work. Be productive. I know you've heard me say that a lot, but here it is in your scripture. The very first thing, it's not point number 27, it's the number one thing, first thing he says, you were created and placed in a place where you can work. And then you have your second role. So what do I say that men's role is, right? Provision and protection. Well, through working, you provide. And then the second one was to guard. So Yahweh tells you right up front, man's role is to provide and protect. It's right there in the law of first mention. Provide and protect. So I want us to, I know I covered that very quickly, but I want to make sure it's very clear. This is that clarity initially. Now, of course, then when we have woman created, she's there to, as we talked about quite a bit, I think in part 1, to be that helper to the man who's doing the providing and protecting. So we covered that last time, so I'm not going to recover that again, okay? So that's part of our reset. So we get back to 1 Corinthians 12, and I don't remember exactly where we left off. I have verse 12 through 27 is what we were covering there. But let's get there real quickly. All right. So in verse 12, all right, it says, for the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, and so also is Messiah. Look, I want us to understand everything is about the Father and the Son and what they're doing. And everything that we're experiencing is to do one of two things. One, it's to help us understand what they're doing and who and what they are. Okay, and two, help us to become them. And so the role of marriage is to give us an experience about them. This is about them. We're going to be going from here into Ephesians 5, which is where everybody I know wants us to get eventually. So we're going to get there right next, after a little bit here in 1 Corinthians, where we're going to talk about those roles. But when we talk about those roles, we see very quickly that it's not about just the roles. It has to do with as the Messiah is with us. So it helps us to understand the Messiah's role. Okay, so we're learning about them as we're experiencing what we're doing. It's to teach us through that experience not only how to become them, but to understand what they're doing anyway, what their role is with us. The Son, especially Messiah with us, because it talks about, in Ephesians 5:22, wives, subject yourselves to your own husbands as to the master. Why? Because the husband is the head of the wife, as also the Messiah is head of the assembly. So that's where we're going next. But here we are in 1 Corinthians, the same idea. He's saying, look, as the body is one and has many members, but all the members are still one body. We're going to see this is the same thing for role of a husband and a wife. They're two different members, but they're supposed to be one body. Now, the assembly has lots of people in it, lots of bodies, but yet they're one body, not that they literally become one body. And that's what we're going to see here in 1 Corinthians, but that they function as a cohesive unit, two walking together in agreement. He says, for indeed, by one Spirit we were all immersed into one body, whether Yehudim or Greek, whether slave or free. We were all made to drink into one Spirit, one intrinsic nature. Go back to the teaching on understanding the Ruach, right? For indeed, the body is not one member, but many. So if the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, does it therefore not belong to the body? And if the ear, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, does it therefore not says I don't, says that? No. If all the body was an eye, how would we hear? If all hearing, would we be smelling? In other words, you need the nose, you need the ears, you need the mouth, you need the hands, you need the feet, you need all of the parts to be one whole body. Isn't that basically what we're talking about when man was incomplete? So Abba made woman to complete man so that they're two different, but yet together they could be one whole? Same thing with the body. Look, Paul talks about this in Ephesians 4 when he talks about the fivefold ministry. We need those five things to grow into, to lead us, to guide us, to instruct us, right? In becoming echad, as a body. That's what Ephesians 4 talks about, that these people are there to help you become one, to be in unity of belief. And unity in belief is not like, oh, well, we have some general concepts we agree on. No, it's unity of belief, all right? All right, so here we go. Where was I up to here? All right, so then it says, and if they all had been one member, where would the body be? Okay? Oh, so it should be. Elohim has set members, each one of them, in the body, even as he was pleased. And if they had all been one member, where would the body be? And now there are indeed many members, but one body. You say, look, there's lots of you, and you've got lots of things that you bring to the mix, as long as you work together as a body. I've often made the not too visually pleasing joke of the body looks like it's fallen on a landmine and been blown up. We don't look like a body, okay? We look like blown up pieces everywhere, all right? When you're a little baby, and I've watched little babies do this, it's kind of cool to watch, as their hand is and they're looking at it like, can I control that? It's just sort of doing something, and I really don't seem to have any way to get it to do what I want it to do. That's kind of how we are. We're almost like babies. We're such an immature body that there are parts of the body that are doing things that other parts of the body going, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's strange. That doesn't seem like it works with what we're trying to do here. And the brain of the baby's thinking, I want to grab that, and the hand's doing some other thing, and he's like, but I want to grab that. Eyes are on it, I want that, and the hand isn't going there yet. Because the connections are not there yet. The unity is not there yet. The hand is sort of moving somewhat independently for a little while, so the legs and everything else. They're just not connected right, you know? Okay. Now, he says, and an eye is unable to say to the hand, I have no need of you, or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. But much rather, those members of the body which are thought to be weaker are necessary. And to those of the body which think that to be less respected, these we present greater respect. And our unseemly members have greater seemliness. Whereas our seemly members have no need, but Elohim blended together the body, having given greater respect to those that lack it. Okay, look, we're going to read at some point about men living and dwelling with your wives and understanding as the weaker vessel. And so here it's saying there are weaker parts, not weaker in a negative way, but they should be then given and strengthened and respected or whatever it is. There's things that you need to understand. He did this on purpose so that you can do your role and they can do their role. Okay? Now, ladies, if you don't act like you're the weaker vessel, and men, if you do not act like you're the stronger vessel, protecting and providing for the weaker vessel, the roles are all screwed up. He says, Elohim blended them together at the end of verse 24, and has given greater respect to the members which lack it, that there should be no division in the body, but the members should have the same concern one for another. Look, I use these verses with the teaching unity and division in the body. But here we're taking this picture for the husband and wife, for men and women's roles. Because after all, that's another two shall become one body. And so we can take all of that and glean that into this. Okay, so if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Anybody notice that in your marriage? If mama's upset, everybody's upset. If dad is upset, everybody's upset, right? It doesn't matter which one. If one is suffering, everybody's suffering. Same thing works with the body. Or if one member is esteemed, all the members rejoice with it. And you are a body, you listen now, you are the body of Messiah and members individually. So you're individuals, but you're part of something bigger. So you can't act like, well, you know, I am the hand, but I'm going to go do whatever I want. Or I'm the foot, I'm going to do whatever I want. No, you're part of a body, okay? And notice that in the body, what decides what the rest of the body does? The head. Who's the head of the body? Messiah. This is where we get back to let this mind be in you, Philippians 2:5, right? The one that's in Messiah. All right, so then he goes into, there's a hierarchy, okay? He's appointed those emissaries and prophets and teachers. This goes back to now the same thing that Paul teaches, not in Corinthians only, but also in Ephesians 4. That there's a structure and there's authorities that are there. There's a structure in a husband and wife too. A marriage has a structure. Now, of course, if the structure is not being, firmly held in place, guarded and protected and worked correctly, then you have a mess, which is what a lot of people have. All right? All right, so now let's take this understanding. Again, we went to 1 Corinthians to give us sort of a picture and a metaphor and a framework so that I think it'll make Ephesians 5 make more sense. So let's go there. All right? Ephesians 5, and we'll begin in verse 22. Okay? Now, before I start, I have to preemptively, I don't want to say preemptively strike, but I want to make sure I've set this correctly for you. Wives, husbands, listen for your stuff. Don't listen for their stuff. So when I start off with, wives, subject yourselves to your own husbands. Wives are listening, husbands are quiet. Because we're going to get to you in a minute, okay? There's enough here for both. I want you to mainly focus, at least initially, on your part. If it says wife, then the wife should be listening. If it says husband, the husband should be listening. You guys tend to listen the other way. All you're thinking about is what the other one's supposed to do. Let's not do that. I want you to listen for yourself. So when I start off with wives, that means that I want you to be thinking, I want the women paying attention. Oh, guys, listen also, but this is not to weaponize any verse. This is the problem within Christianity. These verses are weaponized, okay? Let's not weaponize the verses, unless you're only going to use them on yourself, okay? Unless you're pointing that weapon at yourself, then no. Okay, wives, subject yourselves to your own husbands as to the master. All right, so what we have going on here, okay? I'm going to read through verse 24, then I'm going to kind of break it down, okay? Okay, as to the master. Because the husband is head of the wife, as also the Messiah is head of the assembly, and he is Savior of the body. But as the assembly is subject to Messiah, so also let the wives be to their own husbands in every respect. Now notice that this is beautifully worded so that there should be tremendous clarity because he gives you the model for this. Messiah and the assembly is the model for both roles. Wives, in this model, you're the assembly. Husbands, in this model, you're Messiah. There's roles to be played here, okay? Now, so first of all, it says, wives, subject yourselves. Okay, let's deal with subject yourselves. Let's deal with submission real quickly. I didn't put it in my notes here because I talked about it so much. If you are in a kingdom and you're a subject, do you have any authority? No. Okay? So it's yielding authority. Women, it says, wives, subject yourselves. That means be subject to the authority of. In this case, it's voluntary. You chose to be in this. Okay? Nobody should have forced you to get married. So you subjected yourself voluntarily, just like we do with Messiah, the same thing. We subject ourselves by choice. Free will, we choose. But notice that the next word is to your own husbands. Why would he say all that? To your own husbands, okay? So in other words, wives, who has authority over you? Are you influenced by other people, family members, other men, okay? Who is, it says you need to be subject to your own husband, not anybody else's husband, not anybody else's this or that, your own husband, okay? Not me. If you're married, I'm not your covering. I'm your rabbi, but I'm not your covering. You have a husband. Well, I don't like my husband. Well, then divorce him. But if he's your husband, you're subject to your husband. Okay? I know you don't like when I throw that around so easily. It's not that easy a thing. But you got to have that reality check. Until you're divorced, that is your husband. And if you're not planning a divorce, that is your husband. So I cannot do what he's supposed to do. And you can't ask me to usurp him. Okay? Because I would be breaking this. Wives are to be subject to their own husbands. Okay? As the assembly is to the master. All right? In other words, that's part of it. Also, it says, subject yourself to your own husbands as you would subject yourself to the master. Wow. How do you subject yourself to the master? You love and you trust. I'll make it very simple. You have trusting love. Oh, but Messiah is perfect and your husband is not. I get that. But he's trying to become Messiah and you're supposed to be there cheering him on and supporting that effort. Okay? So let's understand, this is also how we are to subject ourselves to the master. Now, so, have we placed anyone above our husbands or the master vertically? Right? Because this is a picture of a marriage, but it's also a picture of the assembly. Okay? It's a picture of marriage, but it's also a picture. Look, at the very end of this chapter, in verse 32, second to last verse, he says, this is a great secret, but I'm not even speaking about marriage here. I'm speaking about the assembly and the Messiah. So I want you to know he's literally talking about both, and he's very clear to me that he's talking about both, and everybody kind of gets that, all right? But what they don't seem to get is the metaphor. It's not just, Messiah has authority, so I'm the man, you need to be under my authority. No, you have to be under my authority exactly like you would for Messiah, but I have to be authority to you like Messiah would be. We're going to get to that in a minute. Take the metaphor all the way through, please, both sides. Because I don't want you wielding, this is the weaponizing. Well, talk to your wife and say, you need to be submitted to me like Messiah. And she's like, yeah, but you're supposed to treat me like Messiah treats the assembly. Let's get to you in a minute, men, but let's finish this side first, because that's the way Paul wrote it, so we're going to go in order. But I want to make sure you're hearing that. He's giving us a picture. Both partners here have to be what each side is supposed to be in the picture. And you work on the plank in your own eye before you get too hard on the other one for not doing their part of the picture. Okay? Make sure you're cleaned. I don't mean like tahor and tameh. I mean, make sure that you're not sitting there in hypocrisy if you're going to start giving your husband or your wife grief about the way they're walking, okay? As far as like in the marriage. Because nobody likes to be corrected by a hypocrite. And I see a lot of fighting in husbands and wives because the attack comes from the one and the other one looks at you like, really? You have a problem with what I'm doing and you're going to do what you're doing. It doesn't go very well, right? Now, it says, again, that the husband, let's remember the last part of verse 23 says that because the husband is the head of the wife, so verse 23 says the husband's head of the wife. Head simply meaning what? Authority, right? The husband has authority, same way like Messiah has authority over the body. But he says, and he is Savior of the body. Okay, he says because the husband's head of the wife has also Messiah's head of the assembly and his Savior. So we're giving a picture. The husband is to be the deliverer, protector, Savior of the wife. Well, if you're that, then why would the wife ever not feel safe? Ever not feel protected? Ever have anything to worry about? Because we're supposed to not worry about anything with Messiah. The husband, like Yeshua, is to be the Savior. You know, the word there also has the idea of preserver, protector of the wife. Okay? Because I know sometimes we hear Savior, we think of the idea of Christianity, again, the idea of being saved. No, he's the Savior. He's the one that protects and delivers you and preserves you, keeps you safe. All right? So hopefully we're getting that. Now, then we get to the husbands. Okay, actually, we'll finish verse 24 first. But as the assembly is subject to Messiah, there's our metaphor, so also let the wives be to their own husbands in every respect. Because in the assembly, you don't get to pick and choose what you listen to Messiah about. Right? Yahweh said, and it was really Messiah who was at Sinai saying, he said, do you agree to do everything I say? If you do, we got a deal. That means in every aspect, in every respect. Okay, now, husbands, which I've already given you a little bit of a picture. Some of you should already feel terribly falling short based on what I already said. I know the ladies are challenged with what I already said too, but guys, that wasn't just about the ladies, because the assumption is that you're doing your part. Husbands, love your wives. Now, not just any old way, because ladies, you need to hear this too. Just like the men needed to hear when I was talking about you, you need to hear when I'm talking about them. The husbands are to love their wives as Messiah also loved the assembly and gave himself for it. So don't you decide what love should look like. This is a very sort of vertically authoritative, fatherly, protector love. It's a husband now. So it doesn't mean that there isn't any eros or any of the other type of love going on here, but this is that providing love, that agape love that you provide, the same that you get from the above. And so husbands are to love their wives. They are to be made safe, be protected. What did Messiah and the Father do? Where did he put Adam? In a garden. He provided a place for him to flourish, to grow, to be creative. Guys, provide your wives with all of that. Your wife should be able to do, this came up in the zone meeting the other day. Well, you know, what if the wife wants to work and, you know, you said that the men need to be able to provide. I never said that the wives couldn't work. I said the men shouldn't need them to work. I don't care if the wife makes more than you, as long as you don't need her to make more than you. Okay? That's the goal here. All right? So I provide for my family. By the way, I didn't always. There were struggles. And it was good that my wife was able to provide, but she always knew that I was going to make that happen. It was a temporary situation that was being fixed and worked on. So guys, it's okay if you're in a temporary situation, convince your wife that you're working on, you're going to fix it. Because I don't want you to think, well, you always provided. No, I didn't. When we first started in ministry, I made nothing and she made the money. It's just because there was nothing coming in. We were a tiny ministry. But she wanted to support that. But she knew one day it would switch around, and it did. But I also said, and you would then be allowed to do whatever you want. Now, of course, she's chosen because her heart's to do the children's program. By the way, that was never from me. She grabbed the children's program before we even had children and decided to make one when we first started ministry, and we didn't even have children. So it wasn't even like selfishly for our own children and sharing with other people, okay? She did that for years before we even had children because that's her heart, is for the children. And so she now gets to do this, to express fully who she is and so she can become fully the most that she could be. I provide that because that's my role to provide that. I'm not saying bragging like I provided that. I'm supposed to provide that, okay? So if your wife's got some talent or gift that she needs to express, you should be providing an outlet for that so that she can be able to express what Abba made her to be, whatever that might look like. Guys, don't be intimidated if it makes more than you. Just be confident that you don't need it or shouldn't need it, that you've worked your place or are focusing on working to the place where you don't need it, all right? Because I'll tell you what, a husband and wife, if the wife is providing, almost always has issues, okay? I'm not saying you can't work, but there's going to be some issues. Because authority is a little tough to wield when the person making the money feels they should be in authority. Well, you can't tell me what to do, I make the money. And that's a hard thing to argue against, okay? I certainly can see where that'd be an argument, I remember when my wife made more than I did, and I tried to tell her that what she could or couldn't do with her money. She goes, but I make the money, it's my money. And I was like, yeah, but I'm the head. But the argument was a hard argument to make because I wasn't being the head, okay? I was technically correct, but it's a hard argument to make. She was making money, and I'm trying to tell her what to do with it. So that's a problem. So now she works for the ministry, and she makes money. And you know what? I don't tell her what to do with it. She does whatever she wants with it. Amazingly, she actually doesn't do anything with it. But anyway, but she can. I keep telling her, by the way, you can do whatever you want with this. Okay? But that, guys, should be the goal, is understand that there is this need to love your wives. Ladies, but don't think of it just as like romantic love. That's not what it's talking about here. Okay? Because Messiah loving the assembly is not a romantic thing. Messiah doesn't romance us that way. Messiah does what? He cares for us, provides for us, protects us, makes us safe, creates a space and an opportunity for us to flourish and become everything we're supposed to be, right? It's not a romantic thing that we have. And although Christianity, some of them get that way, and that's, I think, a little perverse, okay? That's not scriptural, okay? So husbands, you need to love your wives. Wives, you need to know what that looks like, okay? Love your wives the way Messiah loves us. There's another piece to this. He gave himself for it. See, some of you guys, you don't want to sacrifice anything. I remember they're not in the congregation anymore, but it was a while back, there was a family in the congregation, and the husband absolutely did not want to understand this. He thought loving his family meant spending as much time as he could with them, so he didn't want to work. He'd worked as little as he could, and then he would whine that they didn't have enough money. I said, well, but you only work 4 days a week because you work 4 tens. I said, what are you doing with the other 2 days a week? I got to be with my family. Your family needs you to get out there and make more money. Because he thought it was more that romantic, loving on whatever, okay? Let me tell you something. Your family members, maybe I'm wrong, you can disagree. Your family members, if you're a man, need you, but not in such big amounts that you might think. They need you in consistent, dependable, focused amounts, okay? But they don't have to be big. Genuine, focused attention. Children, the same thing. Oh, but my children need to spend all this time with me. No, and they don't want to, really, all right? But I give my children attention in the doses that they need, especially if I'm paying attention to when they might need it. And so they get the attention. I make sure and sit down and say, tell me about your day, tell me what's going on in your life, whatever it is they want to tell me. And then I don't care if it's like stuff that's mind-numbing to some degree or just trauma, and I'm a guy who can't handle it. I'm going to listen because they need me to give them that attention. They don't need me to spend days and days and all this time with them and all that stuff. People need what they need, okay? You got to focus on what they need. Is it you that's wanting it, or is it what they need? Because maybe it's you wanting all that. Good. Make enough money so you have time to do all that. Then you can take all the time you want. Get your money to make the money for you, and then you have all the time you want. And you can do whatever you want, okay? Again, this is not to be bragging at all, because people are going to read the wrong thing in this. I work very hard, and you all know that, and long hours and everything else. But you know what? I can go on vacation anytime I want. That was not always the case. We couldn't afford to go on vacation for a lot of our marriage. We didn't have enough money to go on a vacation. We didn't go on a vacation for years and years and years. Okay? So you're thinking, well, to love my wife, I got to go on vacations and stuff. Good. That's good. Go make enough money so that you have the ability to go ahead and do that. Or create something. The reason, by the way, I can go on vacation anytime I want is not because it's so much money. It's because I created something that functions even if I'm not here. You can create things that function even if you're not there. You could have a restaurant or a business that's working. There's all kinds of investments that are making money. You can have rentals that are making you. There are things you can have going on that don't need you to be there. And guess what? If you're making money that way, you have freedom to go and do other things. All right? I choose to be here most of the time. I also know that I need to go spend some time doing other things. So I might take a day and go spend it with my daughter. I might take a day and go spend it with my son. Certainly take time being with my wife. Okay? Now, fortunately for me, Abba blessed us with an chauvinist where she likes to work as much as I like to work. I go home and she's right there in her office at her desk working. If sometimes I come home and I want to sit down and watch the news or something and she's in her office working, okay? I mean, she works a lot. But we have that same heart for this ministry work. So we're actually very echad with that, but we spend plenty of time giving each other the type of attention that we need, okay? And so, husbands, you have to give yourself. Some of you can't even give her the remote. You ask my wife if I don't give her the remote every day, anytime she wants it. Very rarely will something be going on in the world that I say, look, I just want to watch this real quickly here, make sure what's happening in the world, and then I'll let you have the remote. Okay? Very rare. Why? Because I'm willing to give myself for her. I mean, Messiah gave his whole life for us. He died so you could live. So you can't give your wife, I can sacrifice working harder, taking a third job, doing whatever it is. Why does it matter what you do? Go do it. Get it done. Give yourself. Oh, but I hate it. Well, you think you should have enjoyed what he did? It's the way it's described is some of the most horrific, painful things you could ever imagine was done to him, and then he was killed. What are you not willing to do for your wife? To give of yourself. This is where we get. Look, we're trying to be as real as we can. You guys wanted this? This is it. Okay, it's straight. So again, back to the wives. Husbands are to love you. That doesn't mean there can't be any romance. The romance may be part of him giving of himself for you, because maybe that's not what he normally is built to do. He's not a very romantic guy. Guys, give of yourself to figure out what they need. Okay? You can't provide if you don't know what they need. And also what they want. And you should give them everything they need and as much as you can of what they want. Needs are simple and very basic, but then there's a lot of things that you could do also that are wants. All right, look, I used this very simple 3-word thing. Last time, I'll use it again every teaching probably. Success in relationships starts with these 3 words. You must be observing, paying attention, right? So if you're watching your wife and paying attention, you should know, which is the second point, which is learn from what you saw. You should learn what makes her smile, what puts her frown, what gets you with laser beam, she's mad at you. You should know. It's funny how you react too. Wives do the same thing. You do something, your husband gets mad, husband does something, wife gets, and you act like you're surprised. Now when you're married like 5 minutes, maybe you're surprised. You're married 15 years, you're not surprised. You shouldn't be surprised, but you act surprised. And then I act even more surprised that the person is surprised. It's like, seriously? Well, I don't understand why you're upset. What do you mean? This has upset me every time it's happened for 15 years. Why are you surprised? Well, I just don't get it. Because what's happening is you're using the filter of you to decide whether it should be happening, instead of accepting the reality that it does happen. If it's a simple formula. If I do A, it's going to cause reaction to A every single time. So why would I do A and expect there to be a different reaction? Unless something has actually changed, it's going to cause the same reaction, okay? Okay, if I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to drop it, it's always going to fall. It's not going to go sideways. It's not going to go up. So I'm not shocked when I let it go that it falls. But in your marriages, you do stuff that you should know is going to get the reaction it gets. And by the way, you try to do that with the stuff that makes them happy. And so you're not surprised when it works, because you should know what makes them happy if you're paying attention, right? You got to observe, and then you got to learn. And then you got to make adjustments. That's the third step of it. Adjust meaning do more or less based on what you learned from what you saw. You saw something, it didn't go well, do less of it. You saw something, it went really good, do more of it. Not really that complicated, okay? Something went really badly, never do it again. Okay? Something went really great, do it as often as you can. I mean, just know how these things fit together, all right? And by really great and really bad, I'm not gauging it by you. You're gauging it by them. You may have thought it went great, but if they didn't, then it doesn't matter. You have to gauge them. You got to find something that works for both of you. So whatever you're doing, if it worked for you, if it doesn't work for them, then you're going to have to adjust and figure out some way so it works for both. Or you've made an agreement that says, I know this doesn't work for you, but it really works for me, so let's do this. And then this other thing that really works for you and not for me, we'll go do some of that too. All right? Okay? So, for example, my wife and I were traveling, and we were at a hotel, and there was a cowboy game on TV. And there was a nice romantic place to be. We were there to do something, a wedding, whatever. I said, look, if she wanted to go, there's a walking mall outside the hotel. She said that she wanted to go spend the afternoon all day the next day walking around this mall. I hate that. She doesn't like the cowboy game either. I said, great, let me watch the cowboy game, and I'll happily walk around the mall with you. She was great about the game, and I was great about the mall. Do you understand? I mean, it's not complicated. Neither one of us was doing something for the other person that we all that much liked, but we were getting what we wanted in exchange, okay? Because she didn't want to sit there at this romantic place in a hotel and watch a football game, and I didn't want to sit in every little store while she window shopped, okay? Now, some of the guys are thinking, I would like to watch the game, and some of the ladies think, I like to window shop. But that's not the point. The point is I figured out how to give her what she wanted. She figured out how to give me what I wanted. Even though it wasn't necessarily what we wanted each, doing the other person's thing. Of course, ideally, you do something you both want, or you both like, right? But guys, husbands, love your wives, as Messiah also loved the assembly and gave himself for it. Now we get into some complications. This is happening in order to, okay? In order to what? To present it to himself a splendid assembly, okay? In order to set it apart and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word. So Messiah loved the assembly, gave himself for it in order to set it apart. So whatever it's saying Messiah did, husbands are supposed to do. Can we agree? Whatever it said the assembly did, wives are supposed to do. Okay, so the Messiah gave himself, okay, for the assembly in order to set it apart, cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word. In order to present it to himself a splendid assembly, not having spot or wrinkle or any other of the sort, but that it might be set apart and blameless. In this way, what he just said, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. Again, there's no romance here, okay? But it's talking about getting to a place of Messiah-like blamelessness. Now, that doesn't mean that the husband is supposed to use the word as a weapon against his wife. That's not what it's talking about here, all right? All right, so what is this talking about? All right, it's giving us this perspective, okay? Perhaps it's talking about a corrective measure. Because look, it says that Messiah did this to the assembly. How did Messiah do this to the assembly? Did Messiah beat everybody in the face with the word? No. But did Messiah actually give correction when they didn't obey the word and didn't do what they were supposed to do? So the word is a corrective thing as well as an instructive thing, as well as an encouraging thing. So I don't want you to think of this only as bringing scripture into everything, okay? It's about your responsibility to bring this marriage into something beautiful, blameless, and perfect as the husband. And so in that picture, you're talking about things that are perhaps corrective in terms of words. So it's not just the capital word here, okay? Admonishing words that are spoken by the husband, not the word necessarily spoken by Yahweh. In other words, sometimes this is about the husband understanding, if I don't have that strength of authority to admonish and correct, then this is going to get ugly at some point and there's going to be problems. So it's being able to know how to correctly, timing-wise, use or not use that authority, not to wield it just randomly all the time, but that you are very careful about it. You don't see Yahweh wielding authority on the people of Israel, every minute of every day, but he'll pop in every now and then and say, okay, enough of this nonsense, we need to fix this, all right? Or give instructions saying, this is the rules, let's try to obey them. Let's try to be submitted to them. This is the decisions that are being made. And when Israel was not respectful to decisions, there were corrective actions that came. Ladies, understand, that is part of the role. Men, understand, you have to do it in a loving manner. Because it says, in this way, you ought to love your own wives. Okay? And so, ladies, if you're the one that thinks you're straightening him out and you're the one that has to do all that, you picked the wrong guy, or you don't understand your role. He's supposed to be leading and by example and helping you to become without wrinkle and without blemish. Of course, guys, you can't do that unless you've already gotten yourself under a covering and you're being discipled and you're being corrected and admonished and straightened out too. And some of you guys are doing that. I'm very proud of you. You've come to me and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need help, okay? I need somebody to bring a strong hand into my life and help me get this right so I can be a strong husband, a proper husband who loves a wife correctly. Again, don't weaponize this. Don't be like, well, you heard what Rabbi said. I need to correct you and straighten you out. That is not what I said. You need to find what works for your wife. Now, Yahweh did some things sort of broad stroke because he's dealing with a lot of people. Israel in the desert, 2 or 3 million people. Dealing with individuals, a little bit different. You have to tailor things a little different because your wife is going to be different than somebody else's wife. And ladies, your husband is going to be different than somebody else's husband, which is, by the way, the cardinal sin in my, that's not, remember what sin is? What's it do? It means something that causes harm and all these other things. What's the cardinal sin? Comparing your husband or your wife to somebody else's husband or wife. Okay? Never, ever compare your children to other children, your husband to other husbands, your wife to other wives. They are who they are and they're yours. Oh, but you see that so-and-so's children don't act that way. Oh, did you see so-and-so's husband likes to do that or doesn't like that, whatever. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're not married to that guy or that woman. And those are not your children. Why would you compare them? Okay? Like, for example, you all should know, those who know me well enough, know I'm not a big fan of being interrupted in my daily activities to take a picture. Which is not my thing. But now, some of you husbands, setting a horrible example, run around taking pictures all the time. And my wife could say, well, so-and-so's husband, you see him, he's taking pictures all the time. Fine, go marry him. You're married to me, okay? Why would you compare? I mean, that's a very simple example. Do you understand? Well, so-and-so's husband makes more money. So-and-so's husband does this. So-and-so's wife does that. So-and-so. First of all, you have no idea what they really are, like, what they really do, or any of that. So you don't know. You know what you see in public. And quite frankly, you know how dishonest you already are in public, so why do you trust what everybody else is doing in public? You know how phony you are often enough when you're miserable but you're smiling, or, you are phony too often enough. Some people are very good in public, and you would never know, and next thing you know, they're divorced, you didn't even see it coming. Do you ever notice, I'll give you an example, I'll take an extreme example. Every now and then we got crazy serial crazies out there that kill people, do all these other things, or they go postal and blow up stuff and everything else. Do you ever remember, ever, when they interview the neighbors, the people say, oh yeah, I knew he was crazy? No, they'll say, oh no, they were just so wonderful and so nice. And they never say that they saw it coming. Because you guys can put on a pretty good show, when behind the scenes it's a disastrous mess. So don't you look at the other person's spouse thinking, oh, why can't mine be more like that? You have no idea what that really is all about. You may have it a whole lot better and not know it, okay? Or you may be comparing your spouse's worst day to somebody else's best day. You saw them at a real good moment, and now you're going to say, oh, how come you're not more like that? There's probably a lot of over there that you don't know and you probably wouldn't want if you knew it. But hey, you're comparing me to that. That's not fair. That's an unfair comparison and very disrespectful. Either way, husband to wife, either way, all right? Doesn't matter which one. The husband comparing the wife to somebody else's wife, or the wife either way, it's terribly disrespectful. Never do that. You know what you want to compare them to? What you're wanting. Compare them to what you hoped they would be, what you thought they would be, and what they said they would be. Because you can say, hey, you promised you would do this, this, and this, and you're not doing it. I believed you when you told me when we got married that it would be this way. All right? And that's for either one, the husband or the wife. You can compare them to themselves and to what they have claimed or boasted that they would do. Don't compare them to anybody else. All right? Don't ever do that. All right, now, let's see where we are. So, men, the point is that I want to kind of make sure we're packaging this thing right. It says you're setting apart the wife through the washing of your words in order to present it to yourself as a splendid wife or assembly, not having spot or wrinkle, etc., that it might be set apart and blameless. Now, bear in mind, in case you're thinking that this is not what it's supposed to be, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but feeds and cherishes it, and also the master does the assembly, because we are members of his body and of his flesh and of his bones. So in other words, your wife is your flesh. It's not your wife is your slave, or your wife is your this, or your wife is your that. Your wife is the other part of you. And so whatever you're doing should be helping to enhance that relationship and that aspect, not just make her whatever you want to make her. You should have picked somebody that was already mostly what you were looking for. Problem is, again, we've talked about this a little bit, in other teachings, and even in the first part of this, probably, that our selection process is pretty challenged, broken, if anything. We're not very good at knowing how to pick, how to select, what criteria we use, okay? And so, and by the way, it's not that anything necessarily means, oh, well, it's just going to be perfect and we all agree on everything. No, but it's about completing each other. Okay, and you should challenge each other somewhat, but respectfully. And you should rub up against each other in ways that irritate a little bit, but respectfully. But you should be in agreement of where you're trying to go and what you're trying to accomplish, right? You're coming together and agreeing, and you're going forward. Right? Because men, it says, remember, he's talking about, for no one ever hated his own flesh. So this refers back to Genesis, the wife coming out of Adam's flesh. So when you get married, in Judaism, one of the concepts that's in Judaism is the idea that when a husband finds his wife, he's finding the piece that was taken from him. So there's supposed to be a completing. Now, of course, well, then why do people ever get divorced? Because they don't find the piece that belongs to them. They find somebody else's piece. And they think that it fits, but it doesn't fit. Okay? Because they didn't look for the right things to figure out what would complete them. And make sure there's a match there that matches. And by the way, matching doesn't mean you'll never struggle. It just means that's the piece that you were supposed to have. At least there should be moments where you feel, okay? Look, I mentioned this in passing, but I think it's really cool. You know how they always say, well, you know how you know you're in love? Of course, love is sort of too ethereal for us. And they say, well, you'll just know it. And they're like, what does that mean? What do you mean you just know it? How do you know when you got the right person? Well, you just know it. And then I met my wife, and I just knew it, okay? I said that in the wedding video, like it was on recorded, you know? Because I looked back, I didn't realize I'd said it, but it was on the wedding video, like as I was getting ready for the ceremony to start, and the camera's sort of running, and they're talking to me a little bit about, was I nervous or this or that? And I was like, no, I just felt like I found my match. And by the way, sometimes it's 2 or 3 rounds of a match, but it's a match. The best of 2 or 3 falls, you know? But it's a match, all right? So I don't want you thinking that you find your match, nothing's gonna be a challenge. No, you might have tremendous challenges. But when things are good, when they're not in a conflict, there's a peace and there's a congruence and a completeness that you feel, then you know, all right? So when I hold her, and I told this from the very beginning, there was just something about it that felt like home is the word I would come to, all right? I'm not trying that to be, winning points with her or anything. She's heard me say this a million times. But I don't know, I just have a peace and a calm and something that just says that, like, I feel whole. And don't get me wrong, I was a worldly guy. I've held other people in my past and never felt that, right? What I'm saying is, and I know she hates when I mention that, but that's my reality, okay? But in that reality, it's something different with her. That's a reality, okay? And so you need to be finding that person that completes you, okay? Now, because you're supposed to be one flesh, right? No one hates his own flesh, but feeds and cherishes it. Men, don't focus on setting it apart and cleansing it and washing it with the word. How about focusing on, in that context, bring it into the context of cherishing? Because if you're doing all this, they're not going to feel cherished. All right? You could be corrective and still help them feel cherished. You could be strong and stand up, and then after you make your point, make sure they understand, it's because I love you. This is not about me. I'm not just trying to be a dictatorial jerk, okay? But they have to be fed and cherished. Because it's what the master does for us. And the master does do that for us. The master will smack the snot out of us and then give us something to remind us that he loves us, okay? And you know that. Now, because we are members of his body and of his flesh and his bones, we're members of his body. The wife is members of a member of the husband's body. Remember, the metaphor goes all the way through this. He says, for this cause, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Okay, they become one. Now, it's interesting that they're called one flesh because you still got the flesh going on. So no surprise, there are issues because you're becoming one flesh, not one spirit. But a piece of flesh was taken out to make the woman, okay? So now you're becoming whole again, one flesh. You still have the struggles, though, but now you're going to struggle together, hopefully. The man's going to struggle and give himself to the assembly and do the working and the providing and the protecting, and the woman's going to sit there going, I believe in you, and whatever you need to support that, and I'll take care of these other things so that you're not distracted with what you're needing to do. Oh, by the way, that's a really powerful thought, ladies. If your man is out there, or you want him to be out there ever to do what he needs to do, then you should keep everything else out of his way and off his plate that doesn't need to be there. Handle everything you can as long as he's doing what he's supposed to do. Now, if it's something that belongs in his plate, bring it to him. I'm not saying don't ever bring anything to him, but you guys tend to bring stuff that really you should be keeping it from. Protect your men, especially from drama. Okay? You have drama, go find a girlfriend to share it with. Go find one of your lady friends and share the drama. No problem at all the drama you want. Why would you bring that drama? I'm not saying a problem that needs to be fixed. You have a problem, men need to be fixing things, not, drama therapists. I just want someone to listen, so go pay somebody. Okay? I'm serious. It's not that men should never listen. I'm just saying that's not what we're here to do. We're here to provide and protect and to cherish and all that kind of stuff. And yes, we'll listen to some degree, but if you're just going to bomb us and dump on us all the time, it's going to make it really tough for us to be motivated to run. Actually, we'll be very motivated to run away and just work and never come home. All right? I've seen, in an extended family member where the husband just would never come home because he just didn't like being home because the wife was always dumping on him. And guess what? They ended up divorced. Shocking. But he never was home. As soon as Shabbat ended, went to work. Most nights was at work. Was never home. Now, did he need to be working? Not that much. He struggled to make a living at times, but he mostly was avoiding her, I believe. Okay? And so unless your husband's really out there, going out there to slaughter the food that you need, so to speak, and get it done, he may be avoiding you. Just think about, wow, I wonder why he's never home. It has to be a good reason, all right? And so you know how you'll know? When he does come home, does he want to come right over to you and spend time with you? Now, he's not going to if the minute he walks in the door, you dump on him. All right? Not gonna work very well. I walk in the door, you know what I don't care? About any of your junk. Now, at that moment, okay? Not never. At that moment, I don't care that the kids were hard and there was a mess that spilled and somebody did this and somebody threw a diaper there. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want you to come over, give me a hug and a kiss, and be excited that I'm home. And I want to hold you for a minute or something, and then maybe sit down, have some quiet. I just was out there working my butt off. Then, after I've detoxed and everything else and unwound a little bit, then I might say to you, when I say to you, how was your day? Okay? Don't dump your day on me. I'm speaking for all the men. Are we good men? Right? Now, it's not that we don't want to be there for you. Don't dump it on us, unasked for, when we're not ready for it. Because we may have had a pretty rough day and need to come to a place that's a haven and safety to come and just relax, unwind, and be quietly left alone. Especially if your man is a leader type person who's been dealing with people all day. I know you've been dealing with children all day, which is harder in some ways. But I don't need new problems to handle and solve that don't need to be on my plate the minute I walk in the door. Okay? I'm also not a man who needs food on the table and everything ready. I just want some quiet. I walk in. I want you to show me you're happy I'm there, that you appreciate me. Men need appreciation. Okay? Respect and appreciation. All right? And then, you can walk in, guys, and just say, is anything urgent? That's fine. But if it was urgent, she probably would have called you anyway. Is anything urgent? And ladies, make sure it really is an urgency, because most of you have no idea what an urgency is. You guys call the urgent line all the time. Do you know that we haven't had a single urgency on the urgent line, even though we have 400 calls on that line? At least 400. And not a single one was actually urgent. Apparently we have a definition problem. Elders, here's the line. He's told me, yep, we got 6 calls on the line again. And usually on Shabbat, while we're here, they're calling. You're watching the screen. I'm up here, he's sitting over there. Who are you calling? It's going right to voicemail in the office here. And it's not urgent. Or they're calling about something they know isn't urgent to try to make it a point. It's like, why are you not just watching and participating? It's Shabbat. It's services time. Because we know the timestamp of the phone call. Phone call came in at 3:35. Well, we're in the middle of this. Anytime between 1 and 5, we're here in the middle of this, 5:30, whatever, right? It's just crazy. All right, so it says, for this cause, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. Guys, if you're still living with mother and father, there might be a problem. And that doesn't just mean physically leave. Some of you are outside the house but still attached by a long-distance umbilical cord. All right? And you'll take mom over your wife's. You never take your mother over your wife. Never take anybody over your spouse. Okay? Never. Wives, don't take anybody over your husband. All right? That unit has to be protected as all authority at that point. There's only one other authority, that's Elohim and the Son. That's it, the Father and the Son, because once you're married, there is no other authorities that you are subject to. Mom and Dad, I appreciate you, but shut up, okay? It's not for you to stick your nose in my marriage. And I'm telling you, a plague on you is going to come if you let that happen. Okay, you're going to bring a plague into your marriage if you let mom or dad insert themselves, or anybody insert themselves into your marriage. Period. Okay? 2, becoming one flesh. You can't fit anything in there, okay? It's one, it's boom, that's it, okay? See, but then you act all funny and you make room in here, and then all kinds of stuff can come in between. Don't do that. Don't let anybody in there. So, men, you need to leave mother and father. Be joined to your wife. So the two become one. Now, verse 32 says, this secret is great, but I speak concerning Messiah in the assembly. He's saying, he's using the husband and wife as a metaphor for the other way. We're using it the other way back. Because I'm trying to teach you about husbands and wives. He was only using it, not so much about husbands and wives, but to understand the Messiah in the assembly. He says, however, you too, everyone, let each one love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she fears her husband. Let's get with the fear thing. Go back to, if you don't understand what fear is scripturally, go back to the fear of Yahweh teaching. It means to have an appropriate awe and reverence and respect for the one that you fear. Okay, we don't fear Yahweh just because, or even necessarily because he could kill us. We fear him because of the level of awe and reverence and respect we have for him, okay? For who and what he is. You need to have that for your husband. Oh, you have no idea. You don't know my husband. Well, then why'd you pick him? I don't know how many times I have to say that. Did somebody force you to marry the guy? Well, you don't understand. We were just dumb, stupid, and on drugs. We got married. Well, that's your fault, okay? I've had that conversation with people, okay? We were not living this Torah walk when we met. We were both big-time worldly losers. Well, then you got what you got. It's just what it is. But he says, this is what we need to be understanding. Hopefully this is starting to make sense from Ephesians 5. We're going to go someplace else next time. I only got a few minutes here, so we're going to close. But I want us to understand, look at this chapter over and over again, or at least it's part of the chapter here, over and over again, beginning in verse 22, and understand, and actually you should go back and read the first 21 verses to really get a context of what he's talking about. In verse 1, he says, become then imitators of Elohim as beloved children. And as imitating Elohim, he then brings us to this husband-wife thing to imitate Elohim in the assembly, right? And walk in love as Messiah also loved us and gave himself for us. So he's going through all of these things, and he says, okay, I'm going to bring this into a much more clear picture and intimacy of husband-wife. So you can go back and read all that just to get the context. I was going to go through it myself. Maybe we'll do it next time. But just so you understand, we ran out of time here. So read this through, which is where I started saying, but look at your part primarily. Only look at the other person's part, please pay attention, from the thought of how can I help them be that? Not to weaponize and say, oh, you see what it says there? How come you're not that? Look, it says there that you need to do this. No. Look at what it says about you, and then what it says about the other one. Think, how can I help them become that? How can I encourage that, support that, inspire that, whatever it is, okay? That's the only thing you should be looking at if it's talking about a wife and you're the man, only look at how can you help her be that wife. If you're the wife looking at the man, how can you help him be that husband that this is talking about? But then look at yourself and say, okay, I'm the wife. How do I be that wife? And if you're the man, how can I be that husband? How can I be like it says in here? Because it's telling you, and these roles you can see connect right back. He tells you, just goes right back to the flesh of my bones, that came from my body. It's going right back to Genesis from the beginning of how this all started. All right? Okay. And the idea of a man cleaving to his, leaving mother and father to join to his wife, that's from the Genesis. It's an Old Testament verse being quoted. So this is how it was originally designed. Paul's just helping people understand, look, you guys are not doing the marriage thing very well. You're not doing the assembly thing very well. Let me help you understand how these things are supposed to work. You can look at it from either direction. You should hopefully get a better picture, is what he's saying. Amen? Amen. Father, we come before you, and Father, we really want to understand why in your infinite wisdom that we can't really understand, you decided to create us, okay? And you made us not just in your image to be, human beings, but you made us incomplete without each other, so you created us male and female. And you gave us this understanding of how to be a husband, how to be a wife, and your expectation of the role of each one. And by the way, that doesn't mean being single is a terrible thing, okay? It simply is talking about, often enough, understanding your role. By the way, men, you can provide for women in a lot of possible ways, appropriately, depending on that role, even if it's not a wife. Same thing with women. You can find leadership that you can submit to and support and be an encouragement to, even if you don't have a husband. There are aspects of this role that can be used with almost anybody, depending on where you are in the structure. Does that make sense? Okay? It's not just on the intimacy level. There's opportunities to practice, because ultimately it's practicing what Messiah does with the assembly. All right? Okay? That's why I offer a covering for some ladies. I can do the man role, not the intimacy part, with other people to provide protection and provision to some degree for people that don't have a man to do that. The ladies get to practice then with having the awe, reverence, and fear to respect the authority of a man. Now, in a marriage, it has an intimacy aspect that's added to that, okay? Don't confuse them. Don't bring intimacy in anything that's not the marriage, because I see people do that. Don't do that, okay? All right? Look, I cringe sometimes, and only because Elder told me about this. But you know what? I found out there's a lot of very, very unsavory ministry people that have daughters that are not their actual daughters. And they're sleeping with them. And they're doing all this other awful things. And so I'd never want to be linked to that thought. I didn't even know that was happening because I've never been in the church world. But he said to me, by the way, there are other people out, and those things always go very ugly and bad. Something we never do here. There is only intimacy in appropriate relationships, okay? But you get to practice submission. By the way, guys, you got to learn to submit, because guess what? We're the bride. The bride's made up of men and women. So you need to find an authority to which you learn how to do that role. Ladies, you get children. You get to learn the other role. How do you do to your children what your husband's supposed to be doing with you? Okay? By the way, it goes right into chapter 6. The next thing it says, children, obey your parents. So it goes right into children, all right? So we can take this in all those directions. So Father, help us to see this right, to look in the mirror and see ourselves correctly, to embrace our roles correctly. We appreciate how fearfully made you made us, and so that we can truly understand how this is to help transform us into what you are, so that we can understand you better, so that we can go forward with this, all right? Oh, I'm going to interrupt the prayer for a second, again. Elder, last time he taught, used some verses out of Proverbs that was talking about knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. It fits into this right here is what I was praying about. Father, I want us to have the information and then interact with that information so we have knowledge. And through doing the information, doing the things we just read, we'll gain understanding. And then with understanding, seeing how it actually works or doesn't work when we apply it a certain way, we'll gain wisdom. Okay, that's what those three verses, if you reverse the order of them, does. Okay? Information, when applied, is knowledge, because you start to see what happens. Then when you apply it, you gain understanding about the whole thing through the application. So if you try to do what's in Ephesians 5 here, this knowledge, this information, you'll start to have knowledge of because you'll be trying to do it, and then you'll gain understanding as you watch how it plays out when you do or don't do what it says. And then through that, hopefully you gain wisdom by doing what? Observing, learning, and adjusting. You get wisdom by paying attention to what happened. And so I really appreciate when Elder used that in his teaching. I wanted to use it here too, so that you can really see how that plays together in this. So Father, help us to truly end up at the highest level, which is wisdom, that we might truly gain the knowledge, experience through application, gain understanding through that application, and end up with the wisdom to apply these things correctly as you intended them. So Father, we come to you now asking all this and submitting ourselves to you in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen.